All right, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do is we're going to get started right now on working on coloring the eye, doing the stuff with colored pencil. So what I'm going to do over here is I've done my basic layers with the white and the black. You see I've used very little black on the skin. I've used just a little bit on the eye. Even in the areas that are going to be jet black, I didn't quite make it jet black just yet. And just as a reminder, white color pencil and black color pencil shouldn't get mixed together. All right, so try not to overlap white and black together. I'm going to start working on the iris of the eye, which is the color part of the eye. And again, I'm using the colors that we used for our green apple. It's the colors that you have at home. So basically, this is going to be an Incredible Hulk version of the eyeball drawing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with yellow. And again, we want to work with yellow because it's the lightest color. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to put yellow over any of my reflections, but I am going to put some yellow over top of the black. And pretty much almost all the way through this entire part of the eye, just like we did on our apple. We basically covered almost all of the apple except for the white spots with yellow. So I'm going to start doing that here. And again, I'm making sure I get some yellow on top of the black color pencil, and I'm getting yellow on top of the white. I'm leaving it a relatively light layer of color because I want to be able to do multiple layers of color, and I still want to be able to see the texture of the paper. And I'm going to try to make my eye just a little bit more yellow looking than the rest of the skin of this sort of drawing. So I'm going to do a little bit more yellow here, and then I'm going to switch over to my next color. Just like we did with the apple, the next color that we use is called lime peel. All right, lime peel. It is the sort of, it's closer to yellow than apple green. You can see the apple green's a little bit brighter. You want to use that color. I'm not going to cover all of the yellow that I just put down. What I'm going to do is a lot by that's close to the pupil, I'm going to leave that basically all alone. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my lime peel color. I'm going to use it in the dark areas and just sort of towards, I guess, the middle of this area. And what I want to see now is I want to see that that iris part is starting to look a little on the green side, and that I'm not quite covering all my yellow. Again, lime peel is a very subtle color. You're not going to see a huge difference in what I'm doing right now, but it should start to look like the outside edge of this thing is getting a little bit greener. And again, I'm avoiding my highlight over here. I'm not coloring over top of my highlight. Next color I'm going to go to is my apple green. That's a really bright, more traditional standard green. And I'm just going to use some of that sparingly on the black parts. And just since I want to make the eye look like it has a little texture, I'm going to kind of make it a little streaky along those edges. Some streaks that go down towards the center of that eye. And at this point, the black part of the eye that you've done in the iris really shouldn't look like black or gray now. It should really look like dark green. I'm going to add a little bit more. And I'm going out of my way this time not to make it look very blended and smooth. I actually want to create that little effect of sort of the streaks that you might see in your eye if you really look carefully in the sunlight in the mirror. Last color I'm going to use for right now is going to be that dark green. The dark green is going to show up pretty easily. So basically think of the dark green as your chance to do more black almost. So if you didn't feel you had enough on the black layer and you want to make it a little bit darker, here's the chance. I'm kind of making little marks and making little streaks that are going to go in towards the center here. And I'm adding just a little bit of that dark green all the way around the outside edges. Now, just like the apple, this is far from finished. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to create some multiple layers. You can see a little bit of what I've done right there, making some of my streaks. Now I'm going to come back and I'm going to add a little bit of white. Where am I adding white? Well, where I want to make things just a little bit brighter. And I also kind of want to add a little bit of that texture to this eye. I also kind of want to make some of the areas that were yellow before kind of stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to add a little bit more white. You can see how I'm doing this. I'm sort of making little marks and sort of like hatching that's coming out from the center, working its way out. If I feel like my highlight could be a little brighter, I'll add a little bit more there as well. And I'm just going to start building, and you can see what's happening in here is that I'm starting to get a little bit of texture inside the eye. And if the eye that you're doing isn't as dark as mine, that's totally fine. You could still layer colors on top of it, and you should, so it doesn't look like it's jet black. It just might be a little less work for you than what I'm doing. I added a little bit more white. I'm going to switch back now to another layer of yellow. And again, yellow I'm going to use all over the place. I'm going to use yellow in the dark parts. I'm going to use yellow in the light parts as well. And I'm sort of coloring my eye out from the center. This is going to give it a little bit of that, really eyeball texture. It's sort of like a little bit of strips and almost like fibery. It's not really smoothed out. I mean, some of your pictures might be a little blurry, and you may not have all that detail in the picture, but feel free to add some of this detail in the picture. The photograph is something that we use as a reference, but if the photograph was good enough, we wouldn't bother drawing it. The purpose of drawing it is to add something extra to it. You can see now by adding a little bit more of that yellow, everything's looking a little bit brighter. Everything's really sort of popping out a little bit more. I'm going to switch back to my line peel. Again, not going to cover up all that yellow that I just did, but I'm going to kind of work that line peel into the sort of center. Definitely going to add some line peel, more line peel to the edges of the eye. Around the edges. Things are starting to get smoother now. You can see the texture of the paper is getting filled up. I go to my apple green around the outside edge, creeping in a little bit towards the center. And feel free, if the eye in your photograph is really, really dark, you can try to make it lighter. You don't have to make it exactly like it is in the photograph. Use the photograph for the basic shading and highlights and shape, and then you can kind of do a little bit of what I'm doing over here, kind of create that eyeball texture. Last color is going to be the dark green. Now, again, with the dark green, if you decide you want something a little bit darker than that, or you really need to make something like black again, don't add black. You can always add just a little bit of the crimson. And your crimson and dark green will create the effect of darkening up some of your elements here. I can always go over this again. In my case, I'm going to kind of polish it up one more time and just add a little bit more, at least in the bright areas, to kind of make this thing sort of pop a little bit more and stand out. And in that last layer, I really want to kind of get rid of any of the texture that I have of the paper still, and come back in here and really kind of make my highlight really sort of glow. Add a little bit more yellow, and I'll use that yellow to kind of blend out a lot of those other areas. You can use your blending stump here, but my feeling is that if you use the blending stump, you may end up sort of smearing away all this nice little textural work, which kind of make it look like a little bit more like an eyeball. And if you feel like you need it, just put a little bit more dark green around the edges. The center of this eye is really going to just be black. I know that we put down a light layer, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover that light layer now with just dark green. All right. We want to kind of try to use color. It's going to read as black anyway, but straight up black color pencil near colors really doesn't look natural. Even though you're looking in the mirror and looking at your eyeball, you're going to see, well, the center of my eye is black. It's going to look black over here, but we're going to use our dark green on top of the black that we laid down. And then if we need to darken it even further, we can actually use a little bit of that crimson. And we can layer the dark green and the dark crimson. So just like we did with the apple, once we start with colors, we're never really going to use black again. The only time I might use it is as some detail and touch-up work at the very end of this thing, where I may want to kind of, do the eyelashes. And even then, you're going to see a lot of times I'm not going to make the eyelashes jet black. So I've sort of filled in all of this pupil right now. It had an original layer of black, but I've kind of covered it up and filled it out with dark green and crimson red. All right. Now I'm going to go start working on the white of the eye. White of the eye, I really don't want to make it too green. I want to keep it pretty light. So I'm only really going to use yellow and our lime peel, and I'm just going to put a little bit on there. I might use a little bit of some of the other greens to sort of pick up on my, my shaded areas in the eye, but I'm really not going to add the full array of green to the whites of my eyes. And a little layer of that, and the yellow pretty much everywhere. I want this stuff to really read as white, so I didn't go over it too bright. But anywhere you start getting that neutral tone, I'm adding yellow to it. I'm going to go get my lime peel, and I'm only really going to use the lime peel in here in the corners of the eye, just wherever I saw a little bit of black. All right, a little bit on the edges of the eye itself, a little bit, tiny bit of apple green just in the darkest parts, and then I'm going to come back with my dark green, which is basically at this point just going to be what I consider my black. Now again, I have to repeat processes. I'll come back and sort of fill in some of these areas a little bit more white. Start filling out the texture of the paper so that the tooth of the paper really has a bunch of color in it. I'm going to add a little bit more white on this side. I don't want to make it too bright, and I'm going to have to sort of counterbalance a little bit of that with some of the color that I add. And then again, I'm going to just repeat the same colors that I've been using. Just going to add just a touch of yellow on this side at the top. I'm going to come through on this side a little bit more yellow, since it is the darker of the sides. Kind of want to make it stand out from the opposite side, which is much brighter, so I'm going to put a little bit more color over here. Switch back again to my lime peel, only using it right around the edges on this side. I don't really want to make this part over here too yellow or green, but as I work my way to the darker side, I definitely want to use a little bit more of that. A little bit of apple green now, just really on the edge of this to work the shadow in. And do a little tiny bit in the outline there. And then some dark green again to sort of emphasize that shaded area and bring down the intensity of this area a little bit. Feel pretty good about that, but I still feel like I can smoothen this out a little bit more. I'm going to get in last layer, going to really sort of just a little bit harder. 3 is the kind of magic number for this. And ideally, again, if you do want, you can always add using your blending stump to kind of smoothen these things out. But I feel like you can always also use a lighter color to blend things in. So if you're trying to blend an area together, just pick up a lighter tone and use that. That waxy crayon will also help in sort of smushing all your layers together. And that's really what's happening now on this side. You see everything's sort of getting a little bit more smoother, polished look to it. All right. So I've got stage one of my Hulk-esque eye popping out. Again, we don't have much choice as far as the colors go, but I feel like this will be a good practice for you anyway as far as layering and everything else like that. And again, you want to work on light layers and build the color up progressively. And I'd say 3 layers of color is usually probably pretty good. And again, if your eyeball isn't as dark as mine, you can improvise a little bit. You could use a little bit what I've done over here. You can always make mine a little darker. I tend to do the same thing that I tell you guys to do, is if you're going to make a mistake, make it that your mistake is a little bit too light, because you could always come back into any of this and darken it up if you wanted to. Alright, so that will be our eyeball for today. Tomorrow I hope to do the rest of the skin on this particular drawing and really get at least most of that demo done for you, and that way you guys can just spend the rest of the class time that we have together over these next 5 days and just work on finishing this. I hope that was helpful. I hope that your drawings are going well at home, and if you are stuck at any one particular part or anything else like that, please feel free to ask the question, send me a message in Teams, or however else you want to contact me. Okay guys,